is Carla from MindPlore with Carla and Friends, and I want to wish all the women here, and also men, because you wouldn't be doing as well if you didn't have one of us behind you, a happy Women's Day. We need you. We want to honor the women as we're talking about imagination. See it, be it, become it. Women have thought, oh, I can't do this because I've been told I'm a woman, I can't play basketball, or I can't do this, but that's not true. Whatever you want to do and whatever you want to be, you can be. So that's the topic for today. I'm very excited about it. I have Jeanne here with me. Unfortunately, Asma was not able to make it. I have Victor Irving Williams here and Pastor Billy, who's been out of the country, I believe, I forget where, he can tell us quickly, but we are here to talk about imagination and the importance of imagination. And Walt Disney has a wonderful quote on it that I slipping my mind now. I hope Jeanne took that quote as one of the quotes for the show. Jeanne, over to you so I can get done what needs to be done.
Okay, I will look up the Walt Disney quote. I did not pick that one, but because we have a plethora of imagination quotes. Imagination.
Whoa, Jeanne. Explain to people, because there may be people who don't understand what that word means, plethora.
I used a $50 word, didn't I?
Yes, and that's good, but when you use a $50 word, we need to take a moment and translate it for people.
Well, it just means there was an abundance of various quotes that I was going through when I was thinking of this particular session, and I kind of lean towards earlier than Walt Disney, because I think imagination is not as respected. I think unless you're in the movies, we don't talk about imagination too often. We honor left brain logical thinking more so. So I wanted to look at some of the greats, and I started with Mark Twain. Mark Twain said, you can't depend on your eyes when your imagination is out of focus. I want you to think about that. When your imagination is out of focus, you can't depend on your eyes. What you see, what you believe that you see, comes often through a various filters that we have, and imagination is an important filter. George Bernard Shaw, the writer, said, you can see things and you can say why, but I dream things that never were, and I say, why not? And there's a powerful message in there. When you can say why not, you can surpass all of the judgments that you might put onto something. When you say why, you're asking for reality. When you say why not, you're allowing your imagination to run. That's how I interpreted that. And then Albert Einstein wrote, imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world. Think about that. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited to what we know. Imagination encircles the world, which is why I thought these were important for imagination. See it, be it, become it. Victor.
Yes.
I thought of you with your focus on changing attitudes when I was thinking of imagination. So let me kick it off over to you.
Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate Carla on imagining
Did I say that?
that.
I'm
Didn't she,
sorry,
Pastor? Didn't she
Victor.
say Victor Irving Williams? But and be that as it may, when you said Victor Irving Williams, this thought doesn't have much to do with imagination, but I had noticed several weeks ago that I don't know anybody named Washington who's not black. Do you? I find that rather odd. Think about people whose name is Washington. They're all black. And I don't know any other names like that. But so think about that in the future in your life. So speaking
Can
of
we?
imagination,
Right. Thank you, Victor.
yeah, speaking of imagination, when you consider that everything in the world that's tangible, this paper, this computer, the books, you, me, every single thing in the world that exists in our physical world once was imagined by the creator who made them. When you consider that, you really begin to see the power of imagination. And if you embrace that, you start using imagination. You start to realize that the life that you're living, you're not observing it, you're creating it. And you're creating it by the thoughts that you allow to inhabit your mind on a regular basis. Imagination, thoughts, belief, they're all different ways of saying the absolute same thing. Some people in my circles, they talk about things happening in the natural and things happening in the spiritual, and they think that they're two paths and they are simultaneously occurring. Au contraire, what I believe is that everything that happens in the physical happens in the spiritual first. So when you want to change something that's happening now, it's too late because you've already imagined it, you've already thought it, and if you want to change something, you have to change something that's going to happen later by what you are thinking and imagining right now.
Yeah. Very good. Hey, I'll jump in here, Jeanne, Carla, and Victor. And Victor, I actually do know someone who is Caucasian, and their name is George Washington Davis. And if you know anything about it, as we study Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Doctor, when he was a student at Crozer Seminary, which is about 20 miles from where I'm sitting right now, and I just visited, it's no longer there, but the buildings are there. Dr. King's favorite theology professor was George Washington Davis, and he just happens to be my wife's uncle. So my wife's, one of her aunts was married to George Washington Davis. That would be Mildred Davis. And he was an instructor, a theology professor at Crozer Seminary for many, many years. And which leads me to imagination. And you're exactly right, Victor, that everything that we see with our earthly eyes has been imagined by someone. I mean, think about this device. Someone imagine that, the device that we're on, the modality called Zoom or Facebook, Google Meet, that was imagined by someone. I love what Albert Einstein said, logic will get you from A to Z. Imagination will get you everywhere. And my filter that I put on, of course, is that God created imagination. And let me throw out an interesting word, that imagination is one of God's transferable attributes. And so, you know, God is, in his creation, has given us many gifts. And one of them is the gift of imagination, because God was thinking of creating the earth, creating woman, creating man. And God thinks a lot of, he imagines a lot, and then he creates. So I love the fact that imagination is a gift from God, and God gave it to us because he loves us. Bang, back to you, Jeanne.
But you have to
Gina,
unmute yourself.
Can't hear you.
Okay, just so everybody knows, I do this on purpose so that we can make sure that Honey, you're muted is the quote of the year. Just wanted to be sure. I think I like where you guys are going with imagination, because it expands beyond what is known. Well, if we stick to what we know, and only to what we know is true, we never get a chance to really grow and see our full potential. You know, if I only went with what I learned in school, you know, and I've completed a 40 plus year career, you know, if I only went with what I learned in school, I never would have done some of the things that I did in my career, which were earth-shattering, exciting things to do. I wouldn't have asked questions like, why did it take so long? Or what is important about this? I wouldn't have known how to focus the message for some of the corporate work that I did. I wouldn't have been able to put my own fingerprint on some of the stories that were told. And that's inconceivable for me to think about now in history. But to be able to do that, we have to be open to what's the issue, what are we looking at, and what could there be? And usually what could there be is something we're not necessarily aware of in that moment. And that's where the exciting part is. I used to work with a lot of young managers in my early career, and we wrote news releases. And news releases are well known to be very well formulaic. You know, this is what you tell them. You put the most important up front, and it's called the inverted paragraph. And they would say, but you're not creative. And I would say, but think about this. You have this framework that we need to work within, because that's the standard. But inside that framework, we can be as imaginative and creative as we need to be. And that would give them a challenge to actually push the boundaries of what they thought creativity was. And I loved doing that, because I've got some great news releases coming out of those guys, because they could look beyond what we already knew. And I think that that's important to get comfortable. I also think that imagination helps us balance from the left brain logical to allow us to be more creative and see where we need to be, see where we want to be. Not everybody wants to be in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, suburban home, although it's comfortable and we all love it. Some of us actually want to be in a hut somewhere out in a lagoon in the tropics and think that's life. Others of us want to be in a very busy downtown area that can walk to have breakfast or walk for late coffee, and they love the city life. We all have different things that we want. But I love that when we can look beyond and we can take away the boundaries that we put on ourselves every day and imagine and think broadly, we can make our world into anything we want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
The only person that has a vested interest in you leveraging the power of your imagination is you.
Yes.
That is why, rather than teaching people how to use their imagination, because there's no money in that, there's no money in you teaching me how to be my best. There's no money in you teaching me how to reach to heights that I couldn't even imagine, that I didn't imagine that I could go. So nobody teaches me that. Instead, our systems teach us things that benefit the person who's teaching us. Now, certainly, I'm not against attending school. I'm not against going to public school. But the things that you learn in public school, it doesn't teach you how to use your imagination. It doesn't teach you the power of imagination. The teacher uses her imagination as she tries to make whatever it is that she or he is teaching you palatable. But at the end of the day, there are some students who go to school who are using their imagination more than others, And those students are not rewarded for that. You have to pay attention in class, listen to the teacher, follow the strict guidelines. And again, I'm not negating the value of school because I excelled in school. But had they told me about the power of my imagination years ago when I was in school, I would be a different person now. The world would be different now because I would have children. And my children, with my mind and my influence, you talk about changing the world. They would imagine all sorts of things happening. And I am using my imagination now way more than what I did when I was much younger. It is by my imagination that I have found my way onto this broadcast.
Yes.
Because I have imagined myself doing something like this, being something like this. I have imagined it. And ladies and germs, I've imagined myself being more. So buckle up your seatbelts. Here it comes.
Yeah. And, speaking of imagination, I think about Carla, the host, the creator of MindPlore. She came up with MindPlore. She imagined it. Hey, I want to get out on the web and I want to teach people, and look at what's happened. I think I've been on probably north of 30 MindPlore segments, and we've talked about all kinds of things. And so I'm in agreement with what we're saying. And I love this quote. You've heard of Peter Pan, right? Peter Pan. We all love Peter Pan. We've known him since, and his troupe since we were children. The guy that wrote Peter Pan said this about imagination: the moment you doubt whether you can fly, you cease forever to be able to do it. How's that? The moment that you imagine or you doubt that you can fly, well, then you know what? You're never going to fly. Carla asked earlier in my introduction that I've been out of the country, and I really have been since the end of December. And so a number of years ago, I imagined that I would be going to help widows and orphans. And I wasn't sure where I was going, but I began to get invitations. And I imagined going to Cuba, Iraq, Kurdistan, Nigeria, Sudan, Turkey, and Gaza. That's 7 countries I just counted out. And I imagine going to those places, and guess where I've established teams that will help the broken, the forgotten, the neglected, the widows, the orphans. I'm in those countries and 10 more. So that's what imagination will bring you to when you can. Victor, you probably know the quote: I never let my schoolwork get in the way of my education. So, so you're right. How many of us are taught to imagine? And I don't know where I dug this quote up, but I read that most of the world leaders are C students. They're just average people, average in school, and yet they have huge imaginations. And we could go down the line. You think of Susan B. Anthony. Speaking of International Women's Day, you think of Susan B. Anthony. You think of so many other women that back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they were imagining the 19th Amendment, that women would have the right to vote. And they imagine it, and bang, 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 it happened. And you could go down the list here on International Women's Day, and you could come up with all kinds of it. If you've seen that recent movie and made in the last couple of years, the women who worked for NASA, there were 3 or 4 of them.
Hidden Figures.
There you go, Hidden Figures. Thank you, Jeanne. I mean, there they were. There they were working for NASA. They were segregated. They were discriminated. They were crushed. But that movie, it's my choice for. Everybody should watch that movie in 2022. Thank you, Jeanne. Hidden Figures. Watch that film, and you will be blessed by the best because you tried all the rest. And there you go.
Now, that was a double entendre, the Hidden Figures title, because they were women and they wore unflattering clothing, so their figures were hidden.
Yeah.
I bet you didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, Victor, on International Women's Day, you decided to talk about the dress.
Well, men don't wear dresses yet.
Some
It
do.
seems like it seems like they might be going in that direction. But now, Arnold Palmer, in the vein of imagination, Arnold Palmer is quoted as saying that he never took a shot that he didn't visualize, which is another word for imagination, before
Yeah.
he took it. There are studies that's been done that they had two basketball teams, and they had one basketball team actually practice, and had another basketball team imagine that they practiced while lying on a couch. And the results that they achieved were comparable. All of these instances, they do things to feed our imagination and they do things to fuel our imagination. But the other aspect of our minds that we need to use is the one that allows us to believe. And I guess, in a sense, imagination and believing something are similar. But if you cannot believe that the imagination is what we say that it is, it's advisable that you nurture that belief, because the belief, like the imagination, you activate it by doing it. Imagine there's this power available, and all you have to do to access the power is to believe in it. That power, ladies and gentlemen, is the imagination. Because if you believe your imagination can bring you whatever you want in life, instead of spending your time trying to get this person to do that or trying to get that person to do this, spend your life learning how to master your imagination.
Yes.
The majority of my time is spent learning how to master my imagination. And as I master my imagination, there's less instances of me trying to control the outcome. Much of what human beings suffer results from trying to control other human beings.
Exactly. Exactly. I want to say amen, if I could, as a pastor, to what Victor just said. And imagination, people that are big dreamers, people that are big, if I could use the word imaginers, dreamers, thinkers, they are normally seen as a little off, right? I mean, when Elon Musk started to talk about the things that he wanted to do, and now over the last 10 years, he's accomplished all of them, including using satellites to bring the internet to Ukraine. And he just flipped the switch and that baby was turned on. So, those of us who were big dreamers and imaginers, we will be criticized. And that's really in the history of personkind, that dreamers and imaginers. I think to the story of a dreamer, Joseph, in the Jewish scriptures. He was a dreamer. And what happened? He became the second most powerful person in all of Egypt. So we want to encourage, on this broadcast, we want to encourage those dreamers out there. Think big, dream big, pray big. Back to you, Jeanne.
It makes me think of Noah St. John and his work in formations. Excuse me. Victor, you're right. If you can't go beyond seeing it, you have and believing it, then it's just a story in your mind. There are business writers who will tell you, or business leaders, I would say, who will tell you, a goal without a plan is just a dream. Making it real, making it concrete is believing in it and doing something about it. And Noah St. John, in his book on affirmations, tells us about how we can say things and continually say them, but then they never make it into our real subconscious. But if you change it to a question, because our ego mind has a way of keeping us safe. That's its main job. The ego mind is to keep us safe. I mean, think about early man when they had to, fight, all kinds of beasts just to survive. So the ego is there over time, is evolved into the best tool we have for keeping us safe if we pay attention. But the subconscious mind takes us beyond. So it's a great to connect with that with belief. So what Noah talks about is, instead of saying, I believe I am the best, you ask yourself the question, because the first thing when you say, I believe that money's coming to me, for example, if you're looking for an affirmation about abundance, your ego mind will say something like, yeah, keep believing that, but you need to get out and work. So it kind of keeps you in check. It sets a boundary. But if you ask a question, isn't it wonderful how money flows through me so easily? Your mind can't say no. It can wonder. And it's in that wonder that's the kind of the magic, if you will, because you start to blow out those boundaries in our own mind that keep us limited, because they call them self-limiting beliefs. So with imagination, we have a way of jumping over those fences of self-limiting beliefs. And when you can believe it, when you can see it, you can believe it, then you start taking those baby steps to make little changes. And those little changes allow you to be or do what you've been dreaming of. And that's part of the magic. Without realizing that you're doing it, you take those baby steps. And the next thing you know, when you kind of open up and you're conscious about it, you look around and you go, look how far I've come. It's an amazing process when you allow yourself to actually believe, I can write a great story, or I can get up and speak in front of a group of 1,000 people. I can do whatever it is that I set my mind to. I can sell, I can develop, I can get Carla to put her phone down for just a second, those are things that we can do. Carla, how does this sit with you?
Well, I want to go back to imagination, where you guys are. It's how we think. If I thought MindPlore, if I thought about MindPlore for even 10 minutes after I had the discussion with Life Edvinson, it probably would have never happened, because with second thought. But we all have those dreams, and it's our dreams that make the world our reality. We can dream for peace. We can dream for MindPlore. We can dream that the cat will listen to me when I want to take the cat. I want to get this room clean in the hotel. It doesn't work. It has worked twice and did not work today. It's how we dream and how we think. The dog has been crazy today, walking around nervously. No idea why, but it's how we think that makes our world what it needs, what it becomes. And my world, although you're in it right now, Jeanne, and you're in it, Pastor Billy and Victor, may be totally different from your world, depending on what you believe and what you think. If you want something to work out, you need to believe it can work out. That's how these cell phones came about. It's how the computers came about. But I sometimes wonder, are we really just a big walking around computer? What are we?
Elon Musk would say yes.
Imagination.
Yeah, Elon Musk would tell you yes, because he says that we're working out of somebody else's computer game.
And it's very possible that's true. Pastor Billy, you're smiling, and I don't know what's going on in your mind. So,
yeah. Well, we're talking about imagination, and again, coming from my filter, we are made. Women and men are made in the image and likeness of God. So, I've always teach on the fact that we're not just part of someone's computer game. We're not just part of, this chaotic disturbance called the universe, but we really have meaning and purpose for life and imagination, and working on the imagination, as Victor said earlier, that's what he does, right? He works on his imagination. And I'm sure he's read every one of those books behind him. And so imagination is something that I revel in, because imagination is like swimming in the ocean. And I'll conclude with this. There's no width, there's no depth. It's really it's without boundaries. And think about that. Today we're celebrating International Women's Day. I think yesterday, Alexander Graham Bell, he invented the telephone. And look at where it takes us now, over 120 years later, the telephone. And he imagined that, and look at where we are today. So thank you, God, for International Women's Day. Thank you, God, for Alexander Graham Bell. That's it.
Has anyone ever thought about a cell phone, that it became our little computer? Can do anything on it. But again, that was someone being imaginative, using their imagination.
Actually, Carla, there's a very interesting story. The original cell phones did a lot with RF, radio frequency technology, but that was considered an old technology in the 90s, in the late 80s, actually. And then most of the RF engineers and innovators and technologists had been retiring out of technology. And this little thing called the cell phone popped up and started taking over. My father-in-law, rest his soul, was an RF engineer, and they brought him back. They wouldn't let him retire. They put him on a list so he could not get laid off, because he was one of those guys that knew how to develop the technology. So somebody got really creative and imagined using RF technology in a different way. And now it's an integral part in a lot of technology that we have today. So sometimes it's reimagining how you use something. Sometimes it's solving a problem in a unique way. I remember him telling me with great frustration he wanted to retire, but they wouldn't let him. But he was brilliant.
But saying that, think about the wheel. We use the wheel in so many ways, but it was invented many, many, many years ago. We think, we talk in so many different ways and so many different languages. But do we always understand each other? We don't listen well enough. Victor, you look like you have something to say.
I always have something to say, but you just mentioned listening, and I nurture my listening muscle from time to time. Every now and then, somebody says something that's interesting, and they hook me into listening to them more. I imagine myself to be an exceptional listener. On the top of everything else, I think of myself as a persuader. And in order to persuade someone, to impact them imagining what you want them to imagine, impact them thinking what you want them to think, you got to know what they're already thinking. And the simplest way to know that is to listen to what they are saying. Because what people are saying, they imagine it before they say it. So just a moment ago, I was just listening. And I'm okay with listening, and that's something that I've developed over the course of time. And I find recently that listening actually serves my purpose. Life seems to go better when I listen. And I seem to experience less conflicts when I listen. Now, I'm not a stranger to conflicts, and I'm not afraid of conflicts. But the people who I interact with, some of them may be afraid of conflicts. So the way to move my life forward is to help them have less and less conflicts. And the way to do that is to listen more.
Yeah, and jumping in there, Victor and Carla, speaking of wheels, you know, Victor, you're a big wheel when it comes to imagination, right? There you go. A big wheel. Where did that come from? My imagination. And I love the fact that imagination, I mean, think about it, it's creative. Dreams are creative. And the more and I'll hook my uh, I'll hook my car to your car, Victor, on that last, is that when we're better listeners, then we can be better imaginers. We can be better dreamers because we're taking stuff in as we're listening. And I believe when we process that, that's going to give us a better imagination because we're imagining, okay, how can I respond to this person? I do a lot of counseling. So I have to be a professional listener, right? So you're listening 45 minutes and you're only talking 15 minutes. And when that information comes in from that other person's vocal cords, their verbal reflection is I'm imagining, how can I help this person? How can I help this person? And how can I lead them to a better place in their life? And so, hey, let's imagine what a good marriage would look like. Let's imagine what your life could look like if you did this or if you dreamed this. So listening leads right into imagination, if I could say that. Jeanne, back to you.
It's one of the things that I find fascinating when I think of some of the most imaginative people that we've had. People like Albert Einstein or Thomas Edison, or my father-in-law with his RF engineering capabilities. They were great problem solvers. And when they were looking at a problem, they were looking at it from every angle that they could. And they were trying to say, what is it that I can do to fix this problem? And going beyond what they knew to invent new things that would fix it. So there's a brief story of the telephone switch somewhere in, I want to say Kansas. I remember the story well from one of my executives that I used to coach, and he told the story. He's like, there were two operators back in the day when you had to stick the wire into the wall, and there was an operator that was doing that, and there were two businesses that competed, and they made a kind of a switch, if you will. But this one guy was wondering why his competitor was getting all the business and he wasn't getting that much over the telephone. And when he realized his competitor was dating the operator, he could see that there was a problem. And so out of that, his solution was he developed the automated switch, which changed telephony enormously back in the day. So that then there wasn't a human going, oh, I'll give this to my boyfriend. No, it was automatically switched over. So innovation often comes because of need. Need is often a precursor to imagination, in the sense of imagination as something that solves problems. Also, imagination is entertaining. So you look at everything that Walt Disney did. He was all about capturing that innocence of childhood entertainment, making us feel like the kids that we are inside. And he has a whole group that are called Imagineers, and those are the people that came up with the things that are in his parks and such. Imagination is a powerful process, and when we can harness it, we can actually take ourselves to levels we never even thought of before. It's a great game changer.
And I think many times when people think of imagination, they think, oh, it's not taking you anywhere. But that's not true. Imagination is what propels the world. When we think, the Wright brothers and the plane, Whoever thought we'd be traveling the globe, flying through the globe many years ago? But now it's, second knowledge. The car, Henry Ford, did he ever think there would be electric cars? Did he ever think, we'd have cars that would be able to be used like a computer? And they are now. Everything's computerized. Something breaks down and everything breaks down. But it's that imagination, being able to think ahead of yourself, that makes all of this very real.
Let's just imagine for a moment. Let's really imagine. Imagine that the only thing that's real in your world is you. Imagine that for a moment.
But that's not even imagination, that's reality.
Tell me more.
That really is reality. The only thing that we can only control in the world is ourselves.
So let's take it one step further. The people, the places, and the things that are in your world, whether they're bringing you happiness or whether they're bringing you sadness, are created by you. I have created this entity called Carla, who does what she does for whatever reason I need her to do it. I have created this entity called Pastor Billy so that whatever the thing that he does, it's like an author creating a story and crafting the characters. So if you consider that the only thing in your world that's real is you, and you have emotions or experiences that doesn't seem to be what you want, then it's up to you to see them differently. It's up to you to look at them differently. And if you are able to do that, you find your world is much more controllable by you. And the more control you feel that you have in your world, the more you enjoy life. When you see things happening outside of you, outcomes that seem to be depressing, that seem to be painful, you have to realize you're making it. You're the one that's creating it. And if you're the one that's creating it, you can stop it. I lived with panic, anxiety attacks for 15 years. 5, 10, 15 times a day. I had this enormous feeling that something horrible was going to happen and I couldn't do anything about it. And I just lived there off and on, off and on, off and on. And I don't have that now. But when I was having it then, it never occurred to me that I was creating it. So whether you're having a good day or whether you're having a bad day, if you consider that you're the one that's creating it because you're the one that's having the mental, emotional experience, then you can simply turn it off or turn it on.
Yeah, and let me jump in there. I would call that, Brother Victor, imagination creation, right? Imagination creation, so there's no consternation in the things that come into your life. And I love what the author of Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll, said. He said, imagination is the only weapon in the war against reality. Which that's pretty deep. And then, John Lennon said, reality leaves a lot to the imagination. So those are some interesting quotes from goodreads.com. Jeanne, I don't know if that's where you go, but I always encourage people about the concept of what I call self-talk. And when we imagine things, and this goes to what Victor's saying about his panic attacks, is that if we're talking in a non-imaginative way, in other words, I believe that non-imaginative thinking is always negative, right? It's always negative. And so, but if we're imagining our lives to be positive, and again, created in the image of God, and that God loves us and has a wonderful plan for our lives, then that's exactly what Victor, and I'm using it in the God concept, that our lives are going to become wonderful. And even in the midst of adversity, And we always read these stories of people that live under very adverse conditions, whether because of poverty or because they're differently abled, you know, maybe physically or emotionally or psychologically. And we hear those stories of how those people have thought differently and imagined themselves differently than what others are thinking about them. And now they're achieving, they are soaring into the stratosphere with a purposeful, meaningful life. And it's just amazing where imagination creation can take us if we're saying the right things to ourselves.
And that goes back to being kind to yourself.
Yes.
Imagining yourself as the person you really are. If you are saying, hey, you're too fat, or hey, you're not thinking clearly, and you speak negatively to yourself, you create that around you in your world. If you begin to just say, okay, I'm Carla and I do what I do, and I accept me for who I am, then I create a world around me that accepts me for who I am. And that's basically what we want to do, is begin to accept ourselves, where we are and where we are going. The more we accept ourselves, the more our life is going to roll in the direction that we want it to get there. We may not be there yet, but accepting where we are is how we're going to get to where we want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Jeanne,
Carla, I don't just have these conversations when you're on the show. I don't just have these conversations on screen. These conversations that we have, and me have these conversations all during the day. And it's not just something that I'm doing because there's a camera on me. It enhances my life. It's how I live every day. I mean, I'm a God guy, Pastor. I'm not preaching today, because if I did preach, I would have to take up an offering. And you don't want me to.
No, don't do that. We know that you could preach the hair off a dog and the paint off a wall, my brother.
But see, it's not just enough to be in a certain place when you think this way. These thoughts would be best served if you would permeate them all day. Think of yourself as just an entity, and you got this big room with all these things. You're gonna pick your hair. You're gonna pick what color you are. You're gonna pick what things you like. You're gonna create this thing that's gonna be you, and you're gonna pick this Carla person. Let's put her over here. And when you do that, you really lose the notion that you're being victimized, because whatever it is that you picked it, right? How come I want to be black? Well, because black looks nice on video. That's the main reason I want to be black. But whatever it is that you pick, you decide why you pick it.
I love it when we can pick our color, and I even had an opportunity to pick my parents, so it was great.
Well, they served you. They made you who you are.
Yes.
The more you love yourself, and the more that you're happy with who you are, the less toxic the rest of the world seems. Because, I mean, really and truly, there's lots of things that's happening around you, and you can pick and choose which ones you're going to think about, which ones you're going to imagine about. And I tend to pick the things that make me feel good. I just hope that I'm not broken, and the stuff that make me feel good make other people feel bad, because I would not really appreciate that. So the thoughts that I embrace, the thoughts that I hug, that I hold dear, are thoughts that make me look the way that you see me look, that make me feel the way that you see me feel. And I know I've gone longer than 2 minutes, but hey.
There's a concept I'd like to bring up in there, and that's grace. When we start to look at the things that we say to ourselves, and we start to look at the things that we really want to be, there's a difference in there. When to move from the negative self-talk to the positive self-talk takes a measure of grace, a measure of acceptance, and a measure of understanding that there's something bigger than you that you can deal with. I often struggle in a conversation with myself about free will. If I have free will and you have free will, what happens when our free wills clash? Oh, yeah, we have things like disagreements, and we have things like, I don't know, sometimes it can be as big as wars, but more often it's just personal disagreements or personal power struggles. And I think most of the world can be pulled into a power struggle here and a power struggle there. And some of them are huge and some of them are infinite or infinitesimal, tiny little things. But when you can take that deep breath and go, okay, what's for the better good? What is it that I want to be? And accept some things and move through them. That's grace. And the power of grace in making our world better, clearer, more imaginative, more insightful is that power of grace. And it wasn't until I started dealing with my own personal demons in my younger years that I realized that there was this thing called grace. And it was when somebody said to me, "How are you handling all this?" And I just smiled nicely and I was like, "It's God's grace." That's all I could say, and
Who said it's me handling it?
exactly. And that's where imagination really takes a role, because it allows you to think beyond yourself. It allows you to see how you could be if you were everything you wanted to be. If money wasn't an issue, if learning wasn't an issue, if education wasn't an issue, everything's not an issue, what would you do?
But
And
who
very
makes
creative.
it an issue, Jeanne?
What?
You make it an issue.
Well, that's exactly it. So
And you are saying, "Oh, I'm not doing well enough. I need to have this money now." Instead of saying, "I am doing the best I can, and I have everything I need at this moment." It's a tweak of the language and how we use it. I'm not saying I'm perfect at this, because
no,
I'm learning.
and that's where the power of grace comes in.
Yeah, the power of grace. And I know we're getting ready to wrap up here in a couple of minutes, and I actually have to go do a funeral. Not mine, but as Yogi Berra said, if you don't show up at other people's funerals, they won't show up at yours. So I got to go to the
Well,
He was such a wise man.
but Jeanne, I love what you're bringing up about grace. I use grace all the time because I have to, because I'm in 42 years of marriage, and I always tell people, I've been in assisted living for 42 years. And they're like, "What, assisted living?" And I said, "Yeah, it's called marriage." And I'm the one that needs assistance. But, I always warn people to be aware of what I call greasy grace. Greasy grace is not anything you want to have a part of. And I imagine that I have a great marriage. I mean, even something as simple as that. I imagine that I have a great marriage. And so what do I have? I have a great marriage to Nancy for 42 years. And, she's never once thought of divorce. She has thought of murder, but never divorce.
well, she may have told you that she never thought of divorce.
Right. That's right. So those that are viewing this, it's as simple as thinking that I have, imagining, dreaming that I have a great marriage, and therefore I think, therefore I am, right? Didn't somebody famous say that one time? I think, therefore I
Mickey
am.
Mouse?
Yeah.
Hey, listen, get this. Bob Proctor, who just recently died, he filled his 88 years with a lot of wisdom. One of the things that he said, and this is alluding to the fact that we have everything that we need and we're not missing anything. Bob Proctor makes the point that we are missing one thing, and it's a bit of a double entendre. It's words, semantics, and all that. But the only thing that we are really missing is the awareness that we have everything we need.
Wow.
The awareness that we have. He uses an example of a little acorn. You see an acorn, you pick up an acorn. Inside that acorn is everything that acorn needs to become a huge oak tree. Same thing with us. Whatever it is that we want to become, whatever it is that we imagine ourselves to be, we have all of it inside of us, and we simply need to learn how to draw it out. And drawing it out is by utilizing that concept that we have spent the last hour talking about, and that is the imagination. You imagine yourself being great, you will be great. You imagine yourself feeling wonderful, you will feel wonderful. And it really is up to you. If you imagine yourself having fights, then you're going to have them. I pinned a quote on my Facebook page a few days ago. People were talking about why people can't disagree without being hateful like in the old days. Well, it's like this. Two people cannot fight if one of them doesn't want to. I'm going to be the one that doesn't want to fight, and I don't really mind what you think about it.
Very insightful.
Yeah.
Very important. Go ahead, Carla.
No, go ahead.
Nope, you go.
Okay, it's almost time to end this show, and I would like everyone one very short, simple, be brief thing that you are taking from today's show about imagination.
I'll start. Be a big imaginer. Be a big dreamer. Be a big thinker. It's all about who we want to be. I am that I am. And so go out, think big, dream big, imagine big, and you're going to watch things happen.
Okay, Victor.
Watch this program again, and each time you watch it, pay the most attention to what I'm saying.
Okay. Jeanne.
First, I'm imagining Victor having this great following, being a great spokesperson, being put on all the news programs for his opinions, because it can happen. I'd like to just mention that we shall give ourselves permission to think about what could be. Not what is, not what was, but what could be. And when we take off all of the limiting beliefs, we could be great because we are already great.
Okay, and me, imagination is the source of all you want. If you want to have something, you need to imagine you have it. If you don't want to have it, don't think about it. Think about what you have. And with that, we will be back on Thursday for another edition of MindPlore and Imagination. And I know I'm forgetting something. So Jeanne, no Patreon, but what else am I forgetting?
Well, we stream live on YouTube and on Facebook. So we ask that you feel free to comment and to share. This helps us reach more people. It incentivizes the algorithm to share us out beyond our small audience. And we're looking to grow that audience. So every time you share it or comment, that helps us. So we would prefer that you could help with that. And, enjoy the day imagining who you can be.
Imagine who you are, because in your imagination, you are creating your world. And we will be back on Thursday. And we're still putting together the panel. I know of one person already. And let's just wave goodbye. Bye, everyone. Thank you for watching, and thank Jeanne, Victor Williams. I know it. I'm doing that on purpose.
It's good though. It's good. It's an inside joke.
For coming. Bye.